Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. Our guest today is Gabriel Yap, Executive Chairman of GCP Global. Hi, Gabriel. Good to have you on the show.
Hi, Bram.
Let's take a look and see how markets across the region are performing. We're going to start with, the cryptocurrency market. We've got Bitcoin, which is at 31,954. It's down 2.15%. Ethereum is at 1,948.41. It's down 1.16%. Looking at markets across the region, mostly negative. We've got the Nikkei, which is at 28,068, down 0.78%. The Shanghai Composite is at 3,563.79. It's down 0.02%. The Hang Seng Bucks the Trend, it's up 0.45% at 28,121. The ASX 200 is up 0.04% at 7,339. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is at 3,267.61. It's down 0.57. So what's your view on how markets have performed this morning?
Well, Bram, I think the market's preparing itself for the results season, kicking from next week in greater earnestness. In the US, basically this week, you actually have seen Citigroup as well as the major banks like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs reporting. All of this have come in above expectations. Coming next week, you're actually seeing some of the other cyclical industries, pharmaceutical companies in the US reporting. And then the following week, you basically have 5 of the big tech that is actually within the FANG family reporting. And so similarly, the case for the China tech. So that will actually set the tone for tech as well as basically the markets going forward in the next couple of months and the second half of this year.
Now, Gabriel, I want to ask you about China tech later in the interview, but first I want to ask you about what Janet Yellen said on CNBC this morning, where she expects the US economy will see several more months of rapid inflation. And she expects that prices will ultimately, however, fall back to more normal levels, which is basically what they've been telegraphing previously. She, however, worries about the impact on the housing market. So as investors, what should we be reading into this?
Well, as investors, I think I would suggest that they watch Business Tech Asia closely, particularly our program on Friday, because this was something that we have preempted just about 3 months ago. If we do recall the programs, we have mentioned that the jump in the 10-year bond yield to 1.77% is ephemeral. You can see that right now, they have pulled back to 1.35%. Now, going back to what Janet Yellen has mentioned, I think what she has said is clearly in synchronous with what I actually feel, because if you look at the key inflationary numbers, be it actually CPI, CPI core, PPI or PPI core, as well as the University of Michigan inflationary expectations, it is clear that you're going to see inflation numbers of 5%, which first was notched up just last month, continue to be the case in the next 2, 3, 4, or possibly 5 months. Now, what this means, Brian, is that, with this onset and the background being that the 10-year bond yield, instead of going up, has been coming down, and if it remains down at the 1.35% for this next 2, 3, 4 months, then Yellen is actually on the right track in calling the case, because this would mean that you have inflation. Inflation should fall off next year, but you cannot be increasing the US 10-year bond yield. Now, the low 10-year bond yield, and which actually presupposes that the 30-year bond yield takes its cue from, and that's goes in the pricing of the mortgage market, will be artificially depressed for the next 2, 3, 4 months. That is what she's worried about, and this is something that she has actually hit, so to speak, the thorn on the durian.
Now, speaking of the thorn of the durian, another durian that and another lady, a very influential lady, ARK Invest Cathie Wood. Now, she has warned earlier this week of a valuation reset on Chinese stocks because of the clampdown by Beijing. Now, her weighting on her ARK Innovation flagship ETF has gone to less than 1% of Chinese stocks. Now, while the next generation internet ETF has fallen to about 5.4%. So definitely she's just paring down her Chinese stock holdings. But what's your view of Chinese stocks and their valuations moving forward?
I actually admire Cathie Wood. I'm actually quite puzzled at the way she actually pared down her stake in the Chinese internet stocks. So for example, when we look at her sale of Tencent as well as JD.com, you notice that essentially if the prices are quite reflective, that means because we get daily updates on the sale prices as well on the stocks that they actually hold, you'll be surprised that actually they are making losses on that. See, so but I think on her views on the reset of the Chinese stocks, to this extent I do agree with her, because what is China is undergoing now is a move from the anti-monopoly, antitrust, to actually moving into data and cybersecurity watch. This actually has therefore derailed, the so-called good performance of TT IPO. But this has also set the trend since last week. We mentioned in your program that a few things is going to happen. That is actually more Chinese IPO that is pertaining to data and cybersecurity are likely to list no longer in the US, but in the other major markets like Hong Kong and Shanghai Star Market. It also could actually set off the wave of dual listing or secondary listings of stocks that are already listed in the US in the primary market to move back to Hong Kong or China in a big way. So in that regard, this major reset may depress valuations for the current year, but I think if in anything, the earnings result season that's going to kick off come next week for the likes of JD.com, Tencent, Alibaba, Meituan, it's going to tell you that essentially that, hey, this conglomerates, these big companies are likely to continue to grow 20 to 30%. Now, to what extent, therefore, would these valuations, if they are expensive, then they will be looking cheap come the end of the year, because come the end of the year, people will be looking at discounting the future year earnings.
Yes. All right, Gabriel, thank you very much for your insights.
Thanks, Brian. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. We've been speaking to Gabriel Yap, Executive Chairman of GCP Global, on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out our LinkedIn and Facebook pages. Please like and subscribe them. And also check out our website, www.biztech.asia. Thanks a lot for tuning in.